Good morning. I am your host, Kevin Price, talking to you about you and your business. Got a lot to talk about, and it's your business to keep track with what's happening in the political campaign. You know, I'm working on a new feature for USDailyReview.com, the website I'm involved with there as publisher and editor, and I think we're going to call it Idiocracy Watch. As we continue to mark the decline of Western civilization, I thought the movie Idiocracy was just a comedy, but little did I know it was a harbinger of things to come, and we're seeing them unfold on a daily basis. And so one of our most recent examples was that that fans would rather see their team win the Super Bowl than have their party win the White House. So you see where their priorities are. It lines in very well with the president of the United States being a former wrestler. It just kind of lines up well. So helping me to talk about, and by the way, we have an article about that at usdailyreview.com. You'll want to see that. But lining up with that, someone who I know watches what's happening in the political front very closely is my friend Felicia Cravens. She's watching closely, and she's got a great website, Free Radicals. freeradicals.com, and it supports it's part of the Free Radical Network. And Felicia's also written for U.S. Daily Review and is often on this program. Delighted to have you on today. How are you?
Oh, great. It's freeradicalnetwork.com. But I got to say, it's funny that you're starting off thinking about Western civilization and the movie Idiocracy, because so much of what we're dealing with in terms of like the world picture, all the things that whoever we elect as president is going to have to deal with this idea of, whose civilization is superior. I had a long conversation the other night on a different show about that with one of the hosts around the issue of the soldiers' difficulty with children, boys, being sexually assaulted in Afghanistan by Afghan military commanders. There's a lot at stake, and that's why it's not entirely surprising to me, but very disappointing to hear you say that many more people would rather their Super Bowl team win than their political party. I think the stakes are just a little bit high there.
Yeah, and yet that just shows you, and I don't know, is that a reflection of intelligence, or is it just really the belief that nothing changes regardless of who's in charge, so why care?
I think that's a good portion of it, because there is so much. Government has expanded so much. There are so many moving parts. The average person cannot and really shouldn't be expected to follow it all, but yet we're supposed to make decisions and choose people who will follow all those things, and it just gets to be so much. And we're told all the time they're all corrupt, there's not a dime's worth of difference between them. I don't believe that's true, but I think that narrative definitely benefits liberals and the left agenda.
Yep. What's interesting about this is that, I'd love to know from you probably more. I mean, you're the kind of person a national show would have on this topic, frankly, because you were a person who was interested in politics, but not particularly passionate. At least that's my understanding. Based on our conversations, you voted and you were there, but all of a sudden, the whole Tea Party phenomenon, you said we've got to do something about it, and you kind of single-handedly in the Houston area got that thing ramped up, and saw people coming out of the woodwork who've never been interested in politics before, who got involved in it, many on a very large scale. What percentage of those are still in it, based on your observation?
Well, it's kind of funny. I come from a perspective, though, of 17 years of GOP activism. So, there was 11 years before I ever became a precinct chair in which I was doing Republican politics. So I've sort of been a veteran in the movement and in our local area. But the people that I've helped train, the people that I've helped bring into the process, the people that I've energized, they're still connected to me. They're still doing things politically. The whole thing may not be as visible anymore, but there are quite a few people who have run for office or who have gotten into policy, who've become watchdogs for different agencies. And if they can keep that enthusiasm up and they can keep those ideas of holding government accountable and fighting for better government and better outcomes for people and fighting for people to have more freedom, then I think long term the culture is going to shift. It's just a matter of, are they able to continue that work? Are they able to promote that work? So often we do great things and we are unable to sell them, to give them any publicity.
Okay, so are you saying that the thousands that you and I spoke to at the various events that you held, the majority of those are still active and still involved? Of course, a big percentage of them were never active before, weren't really active then, and so it's hard to tell. They showed up for events but wouldn't do anything else. That's true too, correct?
We moved people into another level of activism in general overall. It's a very few that have taken the reins and done things like running for office or becoming those watchdogs. But every one of those people, we didn't leave them where they were, the couch sitters and the people who just casually complain about things. A lot of them are still engaged in those discussions. They're talking to their neighbors. Maybe the only thing they do is talk to their neighbors about politics where they didn't before. That is still a huge win for those people.
Yeah, that's particularly big for you. I mean, that's one of your big values. I think that's a great one too. Is this simply speaking up and not being sheeple, and just just showing interest in your neighbor about stuff that has far-reaching implications. And so, what do you think about the campaign? I think this presidential campaign, this presidential campaign could be the sequel to Idiocracy.
It has definitely made my head hurt, the kind of issues that we're talking about. There are so many marginal issues that get brought up and brought to the fore. And you can compare, if anybody's really interested, look at the headlines around the campaigns versus the headlines of what's going on in the world. They don't always intersect. We're not always talking about the important issues at the time. We're talking about bait things. We're talking about red meat things or liberal challenges to conservative narratives or something like that. There's this tiny little field upon which most of this campaign is getting fought when there are so many broad issues. It's that kind of makes me a little bit disheartened, but I have hope that we're going to turn the corner into a serious season soon.
Well, the reality is I honestly don't believe, I've been really working this. I've been thinking about this, trying to be as logical as possible. From the very beginning, I said Donald Trump needed to be taken seriously as a candidate. I've also said I did not see him being able to stay long-term as a Republican candidate. And the more we go along this process, the more I come to believe that he's not going to get more than 30% of the vote out there among people who will vote in GOP primaries. I don't see that happening. And as someone credible like Scott Walker walks away, Scott Walker's people didn't flee to Donald Trump. They went to other more credible, more established candidates. What's going to happen is that as these guys fall off, and they'll be falling off more and more as we go along, Scott Walker said, hey, you guys, if you don't have a chance, hurry up and get out so we can consolidate behind a credible candidate and not some crazy guy who's ugly and angry. He didn't use those exact words, but we all knew what he was talking about. We know that as time goes by, about 70% are going to get behind someone, and it won't be Donald Trump, forcing Donald Trump to either get behind that guy or simply run as a third-party candidate, which I see him do. I see him doing a Ross Perot on the GOP in 2016. That's how that's now what I'm concluding. What are your thoughts on my prognosis?
I think you're spot on. I think you diagnosed this exactly right, and it's a sad thing. It's very likely going to cost. If that happens, it's very likely going to cost the GOP the White House again for another 4 years. It will immediately trash Donald Trump's reputation in perpetuity in politics, except as a donor, should that happen. But that said, we can still kind of exploit for now the upside of him, which is, drawing all this attention. We saw the numbers from the CNN debate were phenomenal with, people wanting to see the spectacle. But what we're seeing, too, is I think this polling of, random people off the street, it almost seems. These polls are coming in from that. When you go and you eventually see them polling Republican primary likely voters, that's when we're going to start seeing these numbers change. Until then, everything is just going to be based on name recognition, and that benefits some candidates and not others. The only person who's really risen in a marked trajectory, I think, has been Carly Fiorina. Ben Carson to a degree, but not as steep a curve as Carly Fiorina. And so those three,
yeah,
are sucking
Carson
up all
really
the
hurt himself,
right
I think, in the last debate. Carly really helped herself. And apparently
Yes.
Trump hurt himself maybe a little in that debate. But what's odd about this entire conversation is that to listen to us in this conversation, those are the only three people running for the White House in the GOP. And that's how the voter seems to be acting as well. I mean, it's incredible how all of a sudden guys like Ted Cruz, how long has Ted been in the Senate? 2 years, 4 years, something like that?
Yeah,
No, 2 years. Like 2 years. And what's his name? Rand Paul, 4 years. He was part of the 2010 deal. To watch these guys, you would think these are old-timers by the way they're being treated by conservatives. And so I got to go. I got to take a hard break. Can I hold you for another segment?
Sure.
Yeah, I want to talk a little bit more about this topic. I think it's really very timely. And again, you can learn more about my good friend Felicia Cravens over there at freeradicalnetwork.com. We're going to have more for you right after this on The Price of Business.